Welcome to Wimmer's Wilderness. I'm your host, George Wimmer. I have 30 years of volunteer work, community organizing, and 16 years in local government, 12 of those as mayor. Wimmer's Wilderness is an informed look at politics, community, government, environment, and education from a local perspective.
Hey guys. So this podcast and also Facebook Live for me can be a little bit different because I'm currently recording my Week in Review podcast. I'm going to explain a little bit about what we're going to be doing with this series, and then I'm also broadcasting my recording of the podcast live on Facebook. So this is going to be a format in which there's just really, unless I have a massive emergency or some sort, there's not going to be really any editing of the audio or anything for the podcast. So I want to explain the Week in Review series. When I first started podcasting, most of those podcasts that weren't interviews were Week in Review episodes. And those episodes would take a one primary subject and a couple other 5-10 minute subjects, and we would discuss that. And what I'm going to do in these week reviews, and this isn't going to be replacing my podcasts, my general podcast, the interviews, or when I take a subject like inflation, which will be dropping next week, and putting that out. We're going to do these week in reviews. We're going to record them on Fridays of each week. And it's going to be some topics that are in the news that week. So there's not going to necessarily be a particular, theme I'm going to go with for those, but I am definitely going to be hitting a few things. Sorry, I've got to get a piece of paper that was kind of buried. I didn't want buried. So this week there actually is going to appear like there's a theme, but that wasn't intentional. It's just a couple different areas that have some similar issues going on. So we're going to do this week in review. They're generally going to be about 15 minutes long for the podcast, and we'll see what the feedback is on doing this video. If it's something people are interested in seeing, trust me, I've got a face for radio. I understand that. So it won't hurt my feelings that the video doesn't do as well. The podcasts have been going very well. We generally have in the range of 3,000 to 5,000 podcast downloads. Sometimes it spikes quite a bit higher than that. It did that for a few episodes, especially this past fall and spring. We've been out of podcasting for about a month. Did the Connexus Energy campaign, and that's ended now. So I'm back to focusing on Wimmer's Wilderness podcasts and a number of other things we're doing. I also thought the video might be interesting because between people who follow our Facebook Wimmer's Wilderness page and the who follow it and then who click the like and all that kind of stuff, we've got about 5,000 people there and about another 1,200 to 1,500 people on differing platforms like Twitter, Instagram, I think Pinterest, Reddit, all those different ones in there. So we're in that, I guess maybe 7,000 total, 6,000 to 7,000 total social media followers. So we're going to try this out. All my podcasts are on our YouTube channel as well, but since YouTube is a visual medium and it's basically just the Wimmer's Wilderness logo and then the audio, there aren't too many listens on that format. So I'm going to start out by telling you what the Week in Review isn't going to be about. Okay. We're not going to do a lot of different social type issues. We're going to be hitting the, not to say we never will, but we're going to be hitting those 5 things of Wimmer's Wilderness, right? Community, politics, environment, education, and getting into a lot of those facets that kind of tie together in government, but local government and local community type thing. So a story that's been out there pretty strongly is on transgender individuals and the state of Arkansas, which the governor and the legislature has said, there's never been a case, there's never been an issue, but for whatever reason, they've decided to pass some legislation. They passed one bill that was passed overwhelmingly. The governor signed it. Then they passed another bill, the legislature did, that said no private funds can be used in any institution, public or private, to do any medical care for a transgender individual. The governor did veto that, but they overruled it, the legislature. And then now this last week, they passed another pretty draconian piece of legislation in that realm. And again, it's one of those social issues that we're generally not going to be talking about here, but it kind of piqued my interest because it's an issue that both the governor and the legislature said there's never been a problem. There's never been a complaint. There's never been any type of issue that's risen up. So, you might think Arkansas is, kind of nirvana, right? It's heaven on earth. Everything must be going great, that they're working on passing preventative issues or preventative laws to try to fix an issue that doesn't exist. So all you have to do is either one, be conscious and understand Arkansas and its history to realize that they probably have some greater issues out there. They're ranked 41st in education, 40th in healthcare, 44th in economic development. They are 30th in environmental issues. They're 32nd in infrastructure and fiscal stability, meaning that, they have a pretty decent, stable financial situation as a state. They rank 17th. 3 of those are 40th or worst, a couple in the 30s and that one 17th. So Arkansas has a lot of issues that they could be working on versus this other one. So again, it's the kind of issue we won't be touching. I just, it doesn't, it's not what we're doing here at Wimmers Wilderness. But what we are going to talk about this week and hit on, and again, this whole normal episode will only be about 15 minutes or so. It's a little bit longer because I'm kind of doing an explanation as well for Facebook viewers and podcast listeners as we kind of launch this new series of Week in Review. We're going to discuss local control. So 2 stories that kind of epitomize the issue of local control. And when I was in office, and anybody who's in local government feels this, understands this, regardless of what your political beliefs might be, but state governments trying to take away decision-making authority that local governments have. So Georgia is doing it on the voting angle. They passed a whole bunch of new voting laws, even though their state officials said there's been absolutely nothing wrong with any of the elections. They've all been handled very well. They passed legislation to say that the state legislature can go in and replace any local election official. So when you go in to vote, you go into your local school, your local city hall, whatever building it might be. You may even know the person who's sitting behind the counter to check to make sure that you're registered to vote there and put your ballot in and get your sticker and all that kind of stuff, right? Obviously, this last voting cycle was quite a bit different than previously. But we generally know who the people are running our elections in our localities, and they generally know a good share of the people who show up to vote. So Georgia's decided that since there was absolutely no problem with the last election, they're going to go in and take away that control from local election officials. And, I'm old enough to remember when Republicans were all about local control. I was a college Republican. I'm a small C conservative. I'm more of a bull moose. And, I've got I'll move the arm here so people can see it. And, I love my bull moose back there. I took that picture last year out in Colorado. And it's just one of those things where when, a state party who says that they believe in a certain principle like local control decide that the local forms of government aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. So it's really not a principle. It's just a political power grab. And that is just, it's nonsensical. It's what leads to cynicism in government. The other story is pretty interesting because it's something that a lot of places deal with, whether you're vacation destinations. This is a story out of Florida. Well, the state legislature is wanting to eliminate local county and cities' authority to control rental properties. So in a place like Florida, especially along the coastline, a lot of those places are up for rent on VRBO or Airbnb or any number of other sites. And localities are saying that, okay, these are homes in residential areas. There should be some type of regulation, whether it's the quantity of those that can be rented out, other safety precautions that need to be taken. And the state of Florida saying, no, we don't want any of that. These places can be rented out. Nothing else to it other than the state does want to make sure they collect sales tax on it. These localities, who are elected by their local voters, are saying, wait a minute, these are residential areas. This is where, people are living, families are living. If you have a large percentage of them turning into rental properties, which is a commercial property, okay? And it's not just, the family who may be down on their luck and they're renting out their place. Okay, that's one aspect of it. And during the Great Recession, we saw a lot of that in the city of Isani, where I was mayor at the time, and a lot of communities saw that. But what's really happened over the last decade or so is you have big groups, okay, going in and buying up properties in areas and communities and renting those properties out on these sites. And they're making a lot of money off of it, but they're completely changing the feel and the makeup of those neighborhoods, which were originally zoned for residential and are supposed to be that kind of, nice place to raise your family. And now it's turned into a commercial venture. And what a lot of localities are saying is that, okay, well, one, we want to be able to control what percentage. We don't want half of a neighborhood to turn into essentially individual hotels, right? And not only the concentration of those, but also that there should be more regulation. If you're in your own home, that's one thing. But if you have people, hundreds of people coming in and out of a neighborhood each year, you want to be able to have some regulation over that from a safety standpoint, make sure that the home that's being rented out is safe, just a whole myriad of issues. Well, the state of Florida, again, this local control area is saying, cities, counties, you can't regulate that. We don't want to have any regulation of that, essentially. We want to make sure we get some sales tax off of it as a state of Florida, but we're taking away your authority to control that. And again, that's just, it's not what should be done from a local community standpoint, because each local community should have that flexibility to decide what they want to be. So we've covered local communities a lot, and local control issues a lot, and we'll continue to do that. And it's not just Republican or Democrat. It's a mix. Okay. It's an apolitical thing. Just of late, the last few years, it seems like Republican states have been really pushing down to do more control of local governments, especially big cities, but it really is an apolitical issue. The second kind of area that I want to talk about is climate. And in this one, again, it's kind of a local control thing. The state of Texas, the city of Dallas in Texas, has put forth a couple dozen differing measures they want to meet to try to help what they believe, help combat climate change. And everything from construction standards to energy standards to how different city planning should occur. And once again, the state's saying they don't want any of that. They want to strip away individual cities' rights in Texas to decide what they want to be. Okay, what their zoning requirements will be, building standards. And you see that in a lot of states. In the state of Minnesota, you have that going on now as well, where it's moving through the state Senate in Minnesota. It won't become law anytime soon. But builders and developer groups in the state of Minnesota are saying, hey, we don't want localities to have individual planning and zoning goals. We want it basically a vanilla state. We want from this community to that community to basically be the same. Good, bad, or indifferent, we want it to be basically the same. Now, from a business standpoint, they're looking at it, hey, it'd be a lot cheaper to do that. But each community is different. Every city, every county, every township has a different feel and flavor, and that's the way it's supposed to be. Otherwise, we'd all just live in some place called city, and we would all live in the same home, on the same type of street, and all of that. So again, these local control issues, which seems like it's an overriding kind of plan theme today, and it definitely wasn't. These are just some of the stories that kind of piqued my interest. And for those who haven't heard me talk about it before, I'll get probably a couple hundred different stories, newspaper articles, magazine articles, things that I'll take a look at each week and then kind of put together an episode off of those. So that's kind of another local control issue. Public health. And this is kind of what we're going to wrap up on, because I don't want these week in reviews to really be much more than 15 minutes. But public health is something. I did a story on public health at the beginning of last year. It was just at the very beginning of the coronavirus, and I was talking to a public health director, county health director in Wisconsin. And, we talked a little bit about COVID at the time, but, wasn't a whole lot of information about that. But we talked about public health departments and what they do in general. And a public health department is there, they run vaccination clinics for adults and kids. If there's differing issues, whether it's drug issues, whether it's, STDs, whether it's differing health impacts in a community, they work on trying to get everything from public policy to delivering better health care to the members of their community. And obviously what's going on in a big city is going to be different than a rural community, but there are certainly quite a bit of things that are the same. But one of the things that affects every single public health department, which was really shown at the very beginning of the COVID pandemic, is they're vastly underfunded. Okay. They have an incredibly important mission. The result per dollar invested is tremendous. But unless something is going wrong, most people don't even realize that there really is a public health department. People who receive a lot of public services understand and appreciate a public health department, but the vast majority of people who don't rely on getting their health care through public entity, or who haven't, been recently on hard times themselves, don't interact as often with the public health department as other people do. So that gets us to the state of Indiana, which again, all 5 states that we've talked about here are all Republican controlled states. But in Indiana, they want to strip away the public health department's principal tool for enforcement. So public health departments could have a lot of power. And I'll use the state of Wisconsin as an example. The governor in the state of Wisconsin had put forth a couple different mask mandates. Okay. So whether you're for it, against it, it's not what we're talking about here, but the governor of Wisconsin put forth a public mask mandate, and the Republicans in the legislature in Wisconsin, and the governor's Democratic, the Republicans in the legislature took them to court, and it made it up to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, hey, you don't have legislative authority under what you cited to do this. So it was wiped out. And then it was going to be thrown back to each individual county and their public health department, because public health departments have a lot of power to do public health enforcement. Then the governor found another piece of past legislative power, and once again installed or mandated a statewide public mask mandate. And then that was just struck down a couple weeks ago again. And once again, it went to each of the individual counties to decide if they are going to enforce their own mask mandate. Florida is another good example. There's never been a statewide mask mandate there, but I've recently been in Florida. Each county, and a lot of the counties, at least a lot of the heavily populated counties and those counties that rely on tourism, had a very good, strong mask mandate. Okay. The mask wearing where I was way better in Florida than it has been where I am in the state of Minnesota. Even though Florida is always pointed to as, hey, they're not taking it seriously. And maybe you can say that about some state officials, but a lot of the local public health departments and counties and cities are taking it very seriously. Well, Indiana, again, it's a local control issue at its core, but they want to strip away their individual public health departments, which are in most states a county-wide department. They want to strip away their ability to do mandates. And of course, for some crazy reason, again, it's not what this episode is about, masks have become a very political thing. And they're saying that we're going to strip away your ability to mandate wearing a mask and other stuff as well, which then leads to what happens when we get the next, healthcare crisis. Because there's going to be another one, whether it's a worldwide pandemic, whether it's something that's just in a particular state or locality. Not only do we have public health departments that are underfunded for what they're supposed to be doing, okay? They have tremendous responsibilities in making sure that healthcare and public health policy is going in the right direction. It's a huge mandate. It's not very well funded. Most people don't think about them unless there's something wrong going on. There's something bad going on. And now if you have communities that the state's coming into and saying, hey, you can't implement this basic fundamental control. And look, public health is one of those subjects that a lot of people have a hard time with. Going all the way back to when fluoride was put into municipal drinking water. Okay. The science behind it is pretty irrefutable. It's done a tremendously good thing for not only dental care, but when you have bad teeth and infection, it's overall public health again. But there are still people who believe it's everything from something causing infertility to, some kind of a communist plot to take over the world type deal, which of course none of those things are true, but that doesn't stop a good conspiracy from spreading. I had a council member who wanted us to put a public safety message on our drinking water billing that went out, our utility billing went out, saying that we were putting fluoride into the water, which fluoride has been in the water in the community I live in ever since they had a public water system. So it's still there, those types of issues. But if you start taking away the tools of public health, the next time a serious health crisis occurs, you're taking away a lot of their authority and ability to improve public health. So I think a lot of these states need to stop looking at the thing that's just like right here in front of their face and look way out, okay, of what their decision today for some potentially immediate personal or political satisfaction that they're doing, and how it might hurt, hinder, or cripple our ability to respond to serious issues. So that's the episode today. And again, I'd love to hear comments any which way you want to send them to me at george@georgewimmer.org, whether you want to leave comments at any of our social media platforms. We're going to have this podcast wrapped together here within the next hour or so, and then it'll get put out. Wimmer's Wilderness Podcast is on every single platform you could think of that carries podcasts. You can also go to wimmerswilderness.org and listen to our podcast there as well. It's a free podcast. So if you have iTunes, Google Podcast, if you have, Stitcher, if you have Spotify, and just anything, it's literally on dozens and dozens of places. So thanks for listening. Give me some feedback. It was kind of interesting actually having this recorded. I'm trying to be respectful of my podcast audience and keeping the flow there as well with the visual audience here. So thanks a lot.
Thank you for joining us today. Help us spread the word by telling your friends, family, and heck, even your frenemies that they can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Luminary, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio. Pretty much anywhere you can find a podcast, you're going to find Wimmer's Wilderness. To learn more about us, go to wimmerswilderness.org. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Wimmer's Wilderness.